Greetings and salutations. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Severe Takeaways here on the SevereMMA YouTube page. I am Spencer Kite, your friendly neighborhood Spencer man, joined as always by the young king, Harry Powell. Good, sir, we're going to dive right in because we were starting to have a conversation and we did what we always do and we went to go and have a talk that should kick off the program. And so we hit record. Before I even ask you how you are, let's just get into it. I wrote on Saturday as this fight card was progressing, as we got the news that the main event between Nikita Krylov and Ryan Spann was being pulled, something along the lines of the complaints are frustrating to me because if any event loses its main event, the fight card is going to be greatly diminished. And while I understand and agree with the criticisms of recent UFC cards, especially these last two, in terms of the depth and quality, it seems interesting to me that there's rarely a time that someone says, hey, you know what we could do is not make UFC 285 as stacked as it is and spread some of this stuff out so that we have B plus shows all the way along or B level shows all the way along, as opposed to a C or a D and then an A plus next weekend. Your thoughts to kick us off?
So I think that's a two-parter, right? I'm going to excuse my raspy voice. I'm a little poorly. So I think the first part is like the card feeling a little drab. So obviously I don't watch the cards live often. I'll watch them more often than not. I'll watch them the next day. I train on a Sunday morning, the same as I train every other day, and so I want to try and prioritize sleep more than anything else. So when I watch them, I generally watch them first fight to the main event, just so I can try and get like a feel for the card, a feel for how the night progressed. Now, as everyone knows, I don't listen to audio, and I always try to skip through the corner unless there's something interesting that's happening in the round. I'll then turn the audio on to listen to what the corner has to say. But very rarely will I, watch a whole 7-hour thing all the way through. But when I watched the card from Saturday night, I don't know whether it's because the main event was lost. And even though I wasn't the most excited about the main event, I don't know whether because the main event was lost and as a result of that, the fighters, the sort of ambiance to the card was slightly more dull. And I don't know how that could be even possibly begin to be measured. But it felt to me as though there was a couple of fights on the card that were very interesting, and we got some very interesting fights out of them, right? And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Andre Muniz and Brendan Allen. We'll talk about Aliyev and Alves, and we'll talk about some of the other fights that were in some fashion mayhem and some fashions, whatever, just interesting decisions. But there was just a portion where it just felt a little drab, lacking excitement and that's not for the want of finishes. And I think this is a conversation to be had and something maybe we'll do on Speaker's Corner, because we had finishes. Mm-hmm. We had some, not a ton of storylines, but we had some storylines. And I think that to me is the crux of it. Right?
And so I would equate the drabness, and believe me, this isn't like, I'm not the guy that can't see the forest for the trees here. The drabness is because there's a lot of brand new names on this card. There's a lot of names that people don't care about. There's a lot of unranked fighters, or, one of the few remaining ranked fighters that was on the card is Augusto Sakai. He may actually be out of the heavyweight rankings going into this event, but he's on a 4-fight losing streak. And then he gets promoted into the co-main event because of the way things shake out. And then you're stuck with Augusto Sakai and Don'Tale Mayes as the co-main event. I get those criticisms. I understand them. And just like anybody else, I would really like if the UFC could give us B cards all the way through and everybody said yes to fights and everyone was healthy and we could get great matchups all the way through, and it progressed the way that we often talk about sort of the lineup of fight cards from super great to pretty good to all the way down. But I'm also a realist, and I know that often can't happen. And to me, I'm willing to make, and I'm accepting of the trade-off that for a show like we have coming up on Saturday at UFC 285, shows like this one this past weekend have to exist.
Yes. But I also think that in the same vein, so I'm gonna make a massive detour here. It's just happened in my head.
Bring it.
I was listening to a podcast earlier, and it was discussing the rate of acceleration of tech, right? And how
it was Lex Friedman, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah.
Shouts to Lex Friedman. You're welcome on the show anytime you'd like to come on.
Fucking damn straight. He actually, again, super detour. Jesus, we're going to be here all day. We'll get to MMA eventually, I promise. He posted something on Instagram the other day about filling in a form because he's going to travel all over the world, and like, who wants to have a coffee with him? So I spent about 45 minutes filling out this fucking form, right? So if I get to a point where I'm having a coffee, I don't drink coffee, but if I'm having a coffee with Lex Friedman, I will let you know, because I'll be fangirling all of the way. But yeah, anyway, so he was having this conversation with this fella about the rate of acceleration of tech. And the guy said that one of the things that is not discussed very, very well is that, yes, tech has made life better than it ever has been in a multitude of ways. However, the negatives of tech, as tech grows more powerful, become more negative. And what he meant by that, one of the things that he said about that was like, if we make the ability to make a nuclear weapon, or even just to make a computer virus that can infect computers en masse, if we make that so easily available, there's going to be some angsty 15-year-old in Telford called Harry Powell, right? That's going to be like, oh, I don't just want to burn my living room. I'm going to fucking destroy a city. And then when he realizes that with a couple of lines of code, he could probably do way worse than that, that's a big problem. So the accessibility and the power of tech is becoming a problem, as much as the problems are greater alongside, adjacent to the net positives of tech. And his point was like, as we progress to better and better and better things, the question is, which wins? Like, which side wins? The ever-growing nature of the bad, or the ever-growing benefits of the good? And his argument was that all it takes is a 0.0001% of the world that wants to burn things down to get hold of the ever-growing bad in the next 50 years and do some serious damage. Now, Lex, as the optimist, is like, oh no, but love will win, and whatever. And my argument, I think, here to the UFC's cards are, when they put out that schedule of the fights that are coming over the next 6 months, they are insanely good cards, right? Insanely good headliners, insanely good co-mains and mains. With it comes the net negative of that there are cards like this. But what I think is important is that it's talked about, because it's important to say this card wasn't great. Like, the main event wasn't great. The co-main event was all right, as it turned out. But again, we had a slobber knocker, big meaty men throwing big meat in that middle slot of the main card.
Right.
And, we had this clusterfuck between this oscillation of brand new fighters and fighters that people don't give a shit about. And so I think it's important that we continue to mention when cards are bad, because it also helps us, and this was the other point that they were talking about, which is gratitude, right? Is that when we get to, I mean, today, technically, as we are recording this, peeling back, today is John Jones fight week.
It is indeed.
We are.
It's also Valentina Shevchenko fight week. It's also Bo Nickel fight week. Like
I couldn't be more grateful to be in this fight week. Right. And one of the reasons why I am as grateful as I am for this fight week is because I had to spend my Sunday,
your last 2 Sundays, watching this
at 2 times speed. And Imi comes in and I'm like, I really don't want to watch this.
Right. Can you ask me to do anything else?
Right. But here I am, like an idiot, watching shit I don't want to watch.
And so one of the other things, and I will keep this brief and you don't have to dive into this because I think we've talked about it on a speakers, and I talk about it all the time. I also think there's just a little bit of I don't know them, I don't like them, therefore this is shit. And I get that. And again, everyone is entitled to their opinion. I'm not trying to tell people how to be fans, but like, these men and women have to compete. They have to fight. They have to be on cards. And so I get that you don't know them, you don't like them, you don't think they're important. At some point, some of these folks might become important. At some point, and now maybe you can say, and we can have the discussion as we go through this fight card, that there's not really a lot of people here that you're like, okay, that's big upside. And I get that. But it's like you and I have talked about with the Contender Series, where you bring in anywhere from, I think it was 16 the first year to 38 last season or 42 last season. And people go, oh my God, it's too many people. But the aim is to hit on 2 or 3 at most. And if you hit on 2 or 3, that's a win. And you've gotten to where you need to go. And so I think there's this, to me, there's a little bit of a disconnect of, I want to watch the UFC, but I don't like what the UFC is giving me. I want you to give me better. And fully, understandably, right? Like, I feel that way about television shows and music and movies and things like that. But the choice I make is, well, this got bad real quick, so I'm done. I'm out. Have a listen to us when we talk about the people that you need to pay attention to and that might have some upside. Watch it as Harry does the next day on 2.5 times speed, or see who, you know, the six or 8 or 10 voices that you appreciate, that you value, are talking about the day after, and catch up on it that way. But to sit and say, I'm going to give my Saturday to this thing, why isn't it better? It needs to be. It feels like you're fucking spitting in the wind and then going, spit on my face for. And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just this person that isn't as like entitled or angsty or can see the pragmatism of it, but like, just feels like we get a whole lot of, this isn't good enough, these should be all the fixes. And yet nobody ever wants to pull from the pay-per-views because, hey, we finally got the big enjoyable card. Like, feels like there's a disconnect between in order to get one, you have to have the other.
So I think my only rebuttal to that is that for the longest time, the UFC promoted themselves as the organization who get the best fighters and will always get the best fighters. That's not the case anymore. We've talked about this ad nauseum in other podcasts and other places, but the UFC just isn't that anymore.
And it hasn't been for a little bit.
Right. But I think that these sorts of things,
there's a little bit of that nostalgia of, it was this way before, why can't it be now?
Right. And it's still, the UFC doesn't market itself any differently, really. Right. They may have dropped the explicit nature of, we have all of the best fighters and every other organization is trash.
Right.
They may have slipped that explicit nature away from their programming, but they certainly continue to market themselves as such. So I think that the disparity comes from a lack of explicit marketing on one side, and on the other side is that people have fallen in love with the brand and they have understood a diminishing of quality because they can see it. They don't understand why, but they also don't begin to look anywhere else for the quality. It's like as if Asda or Tesco, supermarket chains over here, if just one of them was open and all of a sudden Asda had nothing in it, but Tesco is a 25-minute walk away, and you just can't be asked to go to Tesco. You know, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. And truthfully, I think adjoining to that, there are the people that are making that 25-minute walk to Tesco, and they look around and they have access to the other promotions. So even just this weekend, we had Bellator Dublin. We had a one championship event. We had other things going on with some recognizable names and some fighters that we know and some big events, some big coverage. And I think that contributes to it as well. But we will leave that there for now. We will touch on the main event real quickly. Nikita Krylov, forced to withdraw from the fight, got to the venue, was feeling ill, recommended that he didn't compete. They have rebooked that fight for essentially 2 Saturdays from now. It will be a part of the fight card headlined by Piotr Yan and Merab Dvalishvili. So we are going to get this fight. I'm happy that it's rebooked very quickly. I think it fits better as a just main card fight on that card, not upstaging the main event. I'll be interested to see if they still book it for 5 rounds. That will be interesting to me. But it gave us a different main event on Saturday, where Brendan Allen picked up a 4th consecutive victory, getting a 3rd round submission win over Andre Muniz. And as we talked about on the preview show, as I talked about last week on One Question and 10 Things, this felt to me like a pivotal fight for Andre Muniz, who at the start of 2021-22, we were thinking, is this guy going to be a contender? And now it feels pretty clear that maybe he missed his window. Maybe the best we saw in those wins over Jacare Ray and Eric Anders to close out 2021 was the best of him. But maybe Brendan Allen is putting it together. I know he's the theme of your spotlight this week. What stood out for you in Brendan Allen, who has been a guy that has shown glimpses but stumbled at times, but right now to me looks like maybe he's putting it together a little bit?
So I don't think Andre Muniz has missed his window. I think the difference and the reason why I picked Brendan Allen was mostly because of the name with which he got a win over and the fashion with which he did it. I say in my spotlight that there are 2 or 3 intelligent decisions that Brendan Allen make in the striking realms that win him those exchanges for the most part of the fight. Muniz, I think, in the 3rd round did far better than before. But I feel like when Brendan Allen felt the first takedown of Muniz and realized that he was going to be able to stop it, and then in the 2nd round, he reverses it and dumps Muniz, and then in the 3rd round just cleanly takes him down himself, then I think it was okay, I could do things to this dude. And to me, I sort of picked him for the spotlight. And actually, I'll admit this is the first time when I've been running this spotlight, which is well over a year now, that I've actually struggled to pick somebody. And I struggled to pick somebody because I wasn't vastly impressed with anyone, right? Like there's generally a moment on a card and I'll watch a fighter and I'll be like, oh, that's the one. Or there may be 2 or 3, and then I have to sit and think about it on a Sunday and be like, fuck, who shall I talk about? But I picked Brendan Allen for the very fact of the last line. And the last line says that being a pure specialist in MMA is dead. And Brendan Allen showed that. Andre Muniz is improving in his striking, was switching stances, was making reads, was making adjustments. But when it came to the grappling, it was jiu-jitsu straight or death. And Brendan Allen said, here's some MMA grappling along with some okay striking. And that was enough.
Yeah, and it's a piece of what has always made Brendan Allen intriguing to me and to many others, right? He had success on the regional circuit at LFA. His only losses coming into the UFC were to guys that held the LFA title and then graduated up to the UFC. His losses in the UFC, Sean Strickland, Chris Curtis, both ranked fighters at middleweight. He feels like a guy that, as you said, is able to present a little bit more of a modern, diverse game. There's still some holes. There's still some stuff to keep working on because he can get a little overconfident and over-aggressive at times. We saw that in the Strickland fight. But this is a really good win. Like, this is one where, to me, even though there are some mistakes, you made more correct choices and did more good things than the guy across from me made a bunch of mistakes and I got a victory. This is a good building block. This is a good thing to move forward on. And I'm really going to be curious to see, one, who he gets next, and two, what he can do to keep building on this. Because this is now 4 straight wins. It's back-to-back finishes over guys that are, if not contenders, because I don't think Chris Jocko is a contender, but respected and reasonable, like quality talents in the UFC. Those things are important. And I think because we've seen Brendan Allen now, this was his 11th fight in the UFC, we lose sight of the fact he's 27 years old. So he's just now touching what we consider someone's athletic prime, the start of that. I think this is a good win.
I think it's a good win.
Or is this a good middleweight win?
I think you've nailed it. Like, let me explain the good things that I think he did.
Yep.
So immediately out of the gate, he did a good job to just measure the range. He didn't just go bashing his way in to find out where the range was. He took his range, inched in, inched out, had a look, threw some low kicks, and was like, oh, okay, cool. This is roughly my range. We can start doing things. Now, he sat behind a couple of nice 1-2s, led nicely with the right hand a few times, landed it well, did some things. But then the moment Andre Muniz lands as well, we're then in these 3 to 4 punch exchanges where it's kind of like whoever stops punching first loses, right? And it felt like both of them, there were moments when neither of them wanted to stop punching, but because they knew that it wasn't the most technical, it wasn't the most pretty, it wasn't the most efficient use of their time and energy, one or both of them backed off. And that's not high-level fighting, right? I would love to have seen at any point Brendan Allen throw his 1-2, roll under the left hand that was coming from Muniz, duck out the right-hand side, and either land another, if he wants to land another, or just reset, back off, and do the same thing. The other thing I really liked was the jamming. So I use the word jamming because that's what we were taught to call it in fucking kickboxing when I was a kid. And it's basically when somebody looks like they're about to throw a shot and you know what's coming, as they're loading up, you step in. And you step in with something that stifles their attack. And Brendan did that really, really well. There were moments when Muniz was throwing just right hands or just left hands, and Allen stepped in with a really nice duck to the left, hits a liver shot, comes up with the right hand, and just does the things. That was all lovely. That was all gorgeous, but he didn't do it enough. Because how to win striking exchanges is to hit your opponent and not get hit. And too many times in that fight, I just felt like Brendan Allen was getting hit and doing the hitting. And then now we're just in a war of attrition, a war of power, a war of grit. And as you climb the scales at middleweight, it'll take you a while to find somebody who will punish you heavily for that. But there will be somebody. It'll be a Robert Whittaker. It will be a Poatan. It will be an Israel Adesanya.
I think there's probably somebody earlier in the climb that sure punishes him.
Brad Tavares will do it, right? Like fighters like this, yes. But you could see Brendan Allen going a little while without fighting a Brad Tavares, right? There's enough scrubs at middleweight that he could put together a something and then do whatever. Like the fight, I have a name, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know if you're going to like it, but I have a name.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have 2 names.
Okay.
The first name is what I think the UFC may do, which is Dricus du Plessis.
Okay.
The fight that I would
is that provided he wins on Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because then it's like 2 pretty big wins coming off of, right? He got the cancelled Darren Till fight, whatever. Dricus is starting to put himself together. He's another fighter that hits really hard, but isn't that great. And again, could do some of the wrestling. And I think if it was straight grappling versus grappling, Brendan Allen destroys Dricus du Plessis.
Right.
But that's the interesting thing. Or do we see Brendan Allen welcome Darren Till back?
That was the name Ian O'Neill threw out as he and I were WhatsApping during this event. Now, we don't know what the status of Darren Till is. He said during that last fight that he felt like he blew out his ACL. I haven't seen any reports one way or the other.
He's been training. He's in Thailand. He's in Thailand in the Brendan Loughnane camp. So
clearly he hasn't. I would be interested in that one more so than Dricus du Plessis, just because if Dricus goes out and wins on Saturday against Derek Brunson, that is a top 10 win. That's another victory for him in a series of reasonable wins since getting to the UFC. Keep him progressing forward rather than tell him, hey, you can have this guy that just got in the rankings. The Darren Till fight's interesting because Darren Till at his best should be able to beat, in theory, Brendan Allen. But Darren Till is somebody that we have to have a big old career retrospective of, and like, where we looking at this dude through rose-colored glasses and all of those things, because who knows at this point.
So I don't think we looked through rose-tinted glasses at Darren Till at all. I think what happened is that, this is completely a psychological assumption on a non-trained professional. Darren Till was sent to Brazil for a little bit of time because he was struggling to keep himself out of trouble in Liverpool. He goes to Brazil, ends up fathering a child in Brazil with a lady that they then don't stay together, and that thing all falls apart and whatever. He comes back to Liverpool, does some really good things, comes in, absolutely destroys Bojan Velickovic, destroys Yasin Ayari. I was there live that night. And looked great against pretty horrendous competition at welterweight, right? Looks not out of place against a pretty solid Wonder Boy, right? Which is no mean feat. Look, you can argue whether you thought Wonder Boy won or didn't win,
for sure.
But
ran level with him for 25 minutes. Worst case scenario, it's a close fight.
Hella impressive stuff, right? And then I just think Darren Till got in Darren Till's way, because you don't go out and look like he looked against Robert Whittaker if you're not a pretty solid fucking fighter. If Robert Whittaker and you do the dance and Robert Whittaker's doing the blitzing things and Robert Whittaker comes out and is like, fuck me, that guy's good, isn't he? He's all right, that fella.
Yeah.
You're not a bad fighter. I think the problem for Darren Till is Darren Till.
We shall see going forward. He's a guy that is forever intriguing to me because I generally agree with you. I think he got hustled at welterweight a little quicker. I think we made more of the Cowboy win and the closeness of that fight with Wonder Boy. I think he wasn't in a position that he should have been fighting for the title when he did. I think that set him back. And then everything that has happened since. And I agree, there's some Darren Till getting in the way of Darren Till. We move to the co-main event. We will not stop here for very long. Augusto Sakai gets a unanimous decision win over Don'Tale Mayes. This to me was veteran fighter beats inexperienced fighter. Guy that has faced good competition beats guy that has not faced good competition. Augusto Sakai gets a much needed win to get back moving forward, ends a 4-fight losing streak, remains sort of to me, the like low end benchmark of the division of like, you can be in there with these guys that are in the top 15 if you can beat Augusto Sakai. And if not, you're Don'Tale Mayes and others. You told me something as we were prepping for this, because whenever we sit down, I say, okay, what have you seen? What are there any fights you don't want to talk about or any that you specifically want to talk about? And you told me what?
I told you that I didn't want to talk about Don'Tale Mayes and Augusto Sakai, and that's because I didn't watch it. And the reason I didn't watch it is solely because I did not want to. I'm kind of bored of this shtick at the moment. Agreed. with the UFC having to have big meaty men doing big meaty men things. Like I went to on Saturday, I went to an amateur MMA show, Almighty FC, which is an amateur show run out here in the UK. And one of my friends owns half of it, and they ran like a prelim set of, I don't know, 8 fights or something, and then a pro fight, and then 5 amateur titles were on the line, right? And there were 4 absolutely fantastic amateur fights for those titles. During the actual card itself, there were loads of great fights, really genuinely really good fights for an amateur level. A couple which were a couple of debutant amateurs, and they're a bit nervous and they're a bit nervy, as you can imagine, right? Like, fucking hell, all that stuff, fine. The one amateur title fight that was horrendous was heavyweight. It was 2 big sloppy meaty men doing 2 big sloppy meaty men things, right? And it's just, I'd watched it live for fucking, what is it, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 minutes. I had no interest in watching 25 minutes of Augusto Sakai, even 15 minutes of Augusto Sakai.
Fair.
Yeah, sorry.
Fair. We need to stop with the heavyweights in the middle of the main card of these shows. Please, dear God, UFC. Move to a fight that had everyone interested. The return of Tatiana Suarez. She gets a second round stoppage win over Montana De La Rosa at flyweight. Is asked afterwards by Michael Bisping, flyweight or strawweight. And she said, I'm going back to strawweight. Like, that was the plan all along. But I wanted to just come back, make sure I could get through a camp, make sure I can be healthy, get myself going again. And then we'll go back and do the other stuff, because I still want to challenge for the title. I think it's my destiny to be champion. We all thought that before her layoff. It's a good win, but you weren't as impressed as maybe you were hoping to. You were over the moon on the preview show. I said going in, I'm tempering my expectations because it's been nearly 4 years. Not letting myself get ahead of myself. And you said, nah, fuck that. I'm all the way ahead of it. We're on the moon. Let's go. And then you watched the fight and you booked your return home from the moon.
So I think merely I chose not to buy a big house on the moon.
Fair. You'll just rent for now?
I might just rent a studio apartment for now.
Airbnb.
There was some vintage Tatiana Suarez in there when we got to Rollins. And
yes.
It felt to me like she'd been out for 4 years,
and was fighting up in weight.
And I didn't know that she'd said strawweight, right? I obviously don't watch the post-fight, whatever's. So that fills me with a ton of confidence, if I'm honest, because it felt to me like there was a skills gap in that Tatiana Suarez, when it got to the grappling exchanges, was superior to Montana De La Rosa. De La Rosa did a great job, actually, of fighting every position.
Yeah.
But you can fight there's a couple of lads in the gym who are always one step ahead of me when we're rolling, and I can fight my way to the position, but I will always lose.
It's right? The thing you said last week about AJ Fletcher being a great training partner for Dustin Poirier. He's going to push him. Montana De La Rosa pushed Tatiana Suarez and made her work for every inch of this. But as you said, when it gets to brass tacks, Tatiana Suarez is just going to be better than you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's fine, right? Yep. That's how fighting goes. That's not a problem. But there were moments in there when Tatiana was entering clinches, or she was looking to shoot on takedowns, and De La Rosa was landing some shots. And usually when you see fighters that are in grappling positions and somebody like lands a couple of pot shots just to be like, well, I need to try to even up some scoring here because there's a potential that I'm going to get taken down and whatever. Suarez looked pretty uncomfortable taking those shots in open striking space. She didn't look super comfortable taking the shots of Montana De La Rosa. And now De La Rosa's not a huge flyweight, right? But, she seems well-muscled. I'm sure she can crack a little bit. But I'm very happy to hear that Suarez is going back down. I think that's the weight class for her. I have no idea about the cut. But given the size and frame and the way she fights, having a physical advantage over her opponents is a vast facet to her game. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some gorgeous, gorgeous grappling stuff in here. And I have the notes and we could talk about it if you want.
Of course I want to.
But it felt to me, I was concerned when I watched her take a couple of shots and the look on her face was like, oh yeah, this is what this was. People haven't been hitting me this hard in the gym. You know, like my hard rounds haven't been like this. Or it could just be she's in there under the bright lights again and it's happening again and it's been a long time and the adrenaline's going and everything's pumping and here we are. It could be. I don't know. But yeah, maybe I should have possibly meted my thoughts. Possibly, maybe.
Maybe a little. I mean, it was ultimately, it's a good performance. And I'm glad you mentioned that last piece of I haven't been taking these kinds of shots in the gym. Because I would wager if you reached out to Tatiana Suarez today, and I don't know yet, we're recording this on Monday at 9:00 Pacific time. I don't know. She's probably on the MMA Hour this week, would be one of my guesses. She'll probably tell you that exact same thing. I went up a division. I hadn't gotten hit like that in 4 years. And yeah, it's still not super comfortable. I mean, she's a grappler. It's still not going to be her favorite thing. But ultimately to go up, get a win after this time off, to get a finish, to look relatively good for those of us that came in with measured expectations. I was a little nervous when she jumped Gilly because we talk about it all the time. It's not necessarily what you want to do, but the way she readjusted and the way she climbed herself back up a little bit, Montana De La Rosa's back, sunk it in deeper, got the finish. I thought it was pretty impressive, but you're the grappler of this twosome. Please tell me your thoughts.
So one thing that it was funny actually. When I was training on Saturday, we were talking about we don't see many snap downs in MMA. A snap down, for those of you that don't know, is essentially you have a collar tie and you pull the person's head lower than your head and you end up in front headlock, right? Fighters just sort of end up in front headlock because somebody's taken a shot and it's failed and they're down blocked and they're kind of just in that front headlock scrambly type position. But Suarez actually used a head snap, a snap down, head snap. It's the same thing. And I sort of smiled to myself at how, serendipitous that was, that we're just having a conversation about it doesn't really happen in MMA. And then here's Tatiana Suarez, the grappler, being like, yeah, it does, motherfucker. Look, jumping guillotines, we've talked about this. I don't like it. It's not high percentage. However, if it's something that you're wicked good at, and if you feel like from that snap down, you can get a good purchase of the neck, a good bite of the neck, and you're in open space like Tatiana Suarez was, fine. There are uses for guillotines in MMA. There are uses. I say this all the time, and I will say it again here. Movsar Evloev versus Nick Lentz is a fantastic use of a guillotine. Movsar likes head outside singles and doubles. Nick Lentz is like, no problem, big man. I'm going to wrap this guillotine and I'm going to force you to do something with it. And from then, I'm going to scramble to my feet. Now, arm-in guillotines are notoriously difficult to finish because you don't have a clean purchase of the neck. However, the thing that Tatiana didn't do correctly the first time, as in the first iteration before she locked a body triangle over the ribs, she had everything perfect. Right? She'd sat her hips in the right position. She was off at an angle. She'd broken the posture of Montana De La Rosa. The tripod was failing for De La Rosa. The head was bent. The hands were in the right position. The difference for whether it was a De La Rosa doing defensive things, but it didn't look like that, or whether it was more a Suarez not applying a guillotine with that much force in a long time, is she leant backwards, right? and you don't want to lean backwards on a guillotine. You want to be crunching your shoulder or rolling your shoulder down your spine so that it contorts the head enough that it's driving the esophagus and the arteries into your arm. When you lean back, you're actually taking pressure off the top of the head. And if you're Montella De La Rosa, you can take a C-cup post in the elbow and start to just drive the post over your head, and you'll pop your head out that way, right? What you want to be doing is squeezing with your legs on the hips to like ab crunch yourself in as you roll those shoulders down, and everything becomes tight. You basically make the body a xylophone, right? It's two xylophones together. It's not a xylophone. What's that? An accordion. Two accordions bent together, right? That's kind of how you want the spine to be. Now, when she climbed at the back and locked the body triangle, she was then able to sit up. So maybe it was just she didn't feel like she had the ability to sit up, but I struggle to see that being a case given the level of athlete that she is. But look, De La Rosa did the wrong things, right? De La Rosa didn't fight the hips. She fought the hands. And whilst that's the primary instinct is to fight the hands to alleviate the choke, if you fight the hands, that's not the thing that's restricting you, really, right? The hands are in a grip, especially if you're in an arm in. The thing that's fucking you is the leg.
Everything else.
And we saw it with Aliev and Alves, right? Aliev gives up a mounted guillotine just so he can actually use his legs to free himself from the guillotine. Now, I'm not saying that I'm promoting this, but I'm saying
right.
that he understood that to get out of the guillotine, he had to address the legs.
Right. The best way for me to escape is to do this thing that looks worse in the moment, but will get me to where I want to go.
I mean, it was risky because a mounted 100%. Guillotine is tight as fuck. But if he felt confident enough, or he knew he was trying to strip the leg entanglement of Alves with his hands, and he wasn't strong enough to do it, well, he's like, well, my only option is to strip it with my legs. And to be able to be in a guillotine that was obviously tight, and to have that level of cerebral understanding of like, oh, I'm just going to give up a mounted guillotine just so I can break this motherfucker's leg entanglements. That's what I expected to see from somebody of the level of a Montella De La Rosa type, right? And we didn't. Fine. No problem.
It's a good win for Tatiana Suarez. I'm really interested to see who she gets matched up with next when she goes down. I don't think you hustle her right into a title opportunity. I think you can do Zhang Weili and Amanda Lemos, and you can give Tatiana Suarez somebody that is in that top 5, top 6 range. You're holding up a finger. You're going to have a name. I'm going to throw out the name Yan Xiaonan, who is coming off a win over Mackenzie Dern, who showed some defensive grappling and some ability to hurt somebody that doesn't like to be on the feet all that much. And I think it's enough of a win that if Tatiana Suarez gets that victory, remains undefeated, you can then look back at the victories prior. She's now beaten another top 5 opponent, and then we go forward. What was your name, sir?
So I have 2 names. The first is the other half of that you just called out.
Okay.
Give me Mackenzie Dern and Tatiana Suarez because I like grappling.
Okay.
Or what's the chances that the UFC do Blanchfield Suarez?
I mean, if she stays at flyweight, then maybe. But I also think
flyweight, isn't she? She's going back to strawweight.
She's going back to strawweight.
Bollocks.
Yeah.
I really wanted to see that fight.
I mean, at some point, maybe.
Yeah, that would be awesome. It would really help if I knew the rankings and stuff, wouldn't it?
Well,
but yeah,
fine.
That would be fucking awesome. I want to see that fight. Like at some point, please, can we just make that happen?
Yeah.
However it happens, can we just make that?
Let's just throw it on a grappling show somewhere.
Oh, that will do.
Let's just do it. Yeah.
That would be great. But yes, I mean, Mackenzie Dern was my initial thought because I think what it does for me is Dern is improving in her striking, but doesn't have an ability to just destroy you in a shot. She also isn't the same level of physical athlete as Tatiana Suarez is. And so the sort of the domineering physicality would lend to Tatiana Suarez. However, we're going to see some grappling things, and we're going to see whether Dern can nullify the wrestling approach
Right.
as probably the best wrestler that she'll have fought in the division, you know?
Yep.
So, like,
Certainly.
yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah. There's definitely some options, and it's nice for there to be some options. It's nice to have Tatiana Suarez back. Main card opened with the all Canadian battle at welterweight between Mike Malott and Johan Linnaeus. Malott gets a late first round submission win, arm triangle choke. It's a good win. It's a solid performance. It's a second straight solid performance for Malott. I don't want to put too much into it because I think Johan Linnaeus is clearly limited, but it's a thing I'm trying to do more of this year as I assess athletes and their performances is look at it from a like, yeah, but he did what you want him to do, right? Like he got the guy out of there in the first round. There wasn't a lot of fucking about. There wasn't a lot of taken bad shots. Maybe the shot that was thrown by Linnaeus that led to the takedown landed and kind of stunned him a little bit, and Malott turned that into a takedown. But ultimately, he gets out of there in 4 minutes and gets a second straight stoppage win. And for a guy that had been off for almost a year and is still relatively inexperienced overall in his MMA career, it's 2 straight first round finishes in the UFC, and it's hard to ask for much more.
I agree. I was disappointed with Linnaeus's defense of the head and arm. You shouldn't be finished from that angle. Now, Malott may have just a monster squeeze, maybe, but I doubt it. Like those angles, Linnaeus should just be giving his back, or he should be doing an ability to bridge into him. And
it seemed like a little bit of, I'm fucked. Let's just be out of here.
Yes. And I felt like, to me, the read of that was Malott showed that there are levels everywhere to this. He moved in and out far better. He was doing the thing that you should do as a southpaw and then switched a little bit, showed Linnaeus he can do things in both stances. I was impressed with Malott. I was impressed. Like you said, I wasn't super high on Linnaeus going in, right? I wasn't super high going in, but he beat Linnaeus everywhere. And you can't argue with a performance like that.
Right. You give him a step up next time. It's not a colossal step. Oh my God, Harry Powell with all the names. Let's go.
The timelines would work if Ian Gary goes out and destroys Kanan's Song. Can we do Malott versus Gary?
I would be down. I'm sure Mike Malott would be down. Let's do that wherever the UFC comes in Canada in the next 6 months, because I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. We go to the prelims. Trevor Peek stops Eric Ghost Pepper Gonzalez the last second of the first round. I will start by saying, as I did on Twitter, when I saw the video of people being like, what the hell was the referee thinking? You can take Kerry Hatley out of Texas, but you can't make him a better referee. Also, I don't think there has ever been a fighter that I have seen in the UFC in the Zuffa era, in the Zuffa era, because there sure as shit were some way back in the Wild West days of getting started, who should best be described as fighting style is street fighting and is the dude that is, as I said in my recap, you're pretty likely to find several Trevor Peeks fighting at a Waffle House or a Walmart every Saturday, no matter where you go, because there's no technique. There's it's just, I am slinging hammers. And if your face gets in the way, I'm getting my hand raised. And so far, to his credit, 8 dudes have stood in there and 8 dudes have put their face in the way. But it's ugly. Like, we're going to be honest here. It's ugly. And somebody soon is going to light this dude up.
I could not believe what I was seeing. On Twitter on Friday, I saw like when they sit in front of the cage and they do a bit of media. He said, I fight like I'm a street fighter. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
And then I saw him throw one right hand, and I was like, what in the fuck is this?
Yeah.
He's awful. Like, no head movement, zero, no
None.
head movement. He walks back on a straight line. He comes in on a straight line. He has no footwork whatsoever. His
It's
feet
just
are always
torque.
anything but underneath him. He loads up on every single shot. You can see every single shot from 17 miles away. And somehow this motherfucker manages to put Gonzalez out. I'll give him one thing. He hits hard.
Yes.
For sure.
Clearly.
He's got some pop in those hands. But boy, oh boy, he is shit. And like, if you put him in there with anyone inside that top 30, fuck
oh
me.
Jesus, if you put him in there with anybody, and if you put him in there with somebody that is 35 through 50 in the lightweight division, they're like Jim Miller crushes this dude.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Okay. Joe Selecki, who also fought on this card, and we will get to momentarily, chokes this dude out in 9 seconds.
Yeah. That's not close. That's not a close fight.
Right? Like Jordan. Okay. We'll get to Jordan Levitt. Let's just skip Jasmine Jasdavicius for a second.
Yep.
And we'll go to Jordan Levitt, who gets a first round stoppage win with some very nice knees along the cage that hurt Vic Martinez, put him down, got him out of there. If Jordan Levitt fought Trevor Peek, Jordan Levitt gets him out of there pretty handily.
Yeah. Look.
And I don't think super highly of Jordan Levitt, though this was a good performance. This was some improvements. Yeah.
Levitt's not a great fighter either. Like,
no, I agree.
Wrestle, right? He can do the things. He can wrestle for sure. And there was a really interesting grip break that he used before he landed the knees. But make no mistake, this was 6 of one and half a dozen of the other for the actual finish. So Victor Martinez was bar framing. By bar framing, I mean like he's got his hands together and he's pushing his hands out in front of him like a bar, so to take the knees on his forearms because he thinks the knees are coming to his midsection, right? I think Levitt notices that and just misses the arm altogether and crushes this dude's fucking face. But
I'll watch it back because you might be right.
So the grip break that he uses is he wants a tie clinch, which is called a plum clinch, which is where you've got both hands around the back of the neck of your opponent. But for a hot second, Martinez's left hand is up, stopping Jordan Levitt getting to the right elbow or the right grip. So Levitt just chops away the arm by elbowing the dude in the head. And like at the same time, as he hits that sort of downward angled elbow, he strips the grip that Martinez had on his hand and then goes to the plum clinch. That was fucking awesome. But like the knees themselves, Martinez wasn't looking at where the knees were coming. He was looking at the floor. And then he had this bar frame to be like, I'm going to be okay. My bar frame will save me from everything. And Levitt was like, no, motherfucker. I'm just going to knee you in the chin. And then we're done here, like real quick. But even in the moments before then, Levitt doesn't tuck his chin. He takes shots with his head walled up and his head snaps back a little bit. And he's one of those guys that I think if I was in there with him, he'd be deceptively rangy, but doesn't fight like that. And then it's almost like he's confused about his own range when he's in there. But like when it gets to the grappling things, he's real good, right? He's got things. But yeah, he's not a great fighter either.
So we'll move back to the fight that we skipped so that we could have back-to-back lightweight discussions. Jasmine Jasdavicius gets a unanimous decision win over Gabriela Fernandez. She played to her strengths. Gabby comes out. She looks like a brick shithouse. She throws smoke. She's got big power. She's throwing big shots. And as forecasted going into the fight, this was newcomer's going to strike. Jasdavicius needs to get it to the ground and should be selling out to get it to the ground. And she did. And every time she put Fernandez on her back, she couldn't get up. And so she did enough. She had a good second round, moving to the crucifix, landing some elbows, doing some damage. But overall, this was a smart play to my strengths. get myself a victory, get back in the win column. Again, I'm not super high on the upside of Jasmine Jasudavicius. She turns 34 in a couple of days. She's had limited experience. She's not a plus athlete by any means, but this was a good win for somebody that is still relatively young in her career, having come to the sport late, to beat somebody with a little bit of pedigree, with a little bit of buzz, that looks like $1 million.
Smart fight, intelligent fight. This is her ceiling, though, I think. And what I mean by that is, for the moments that they were standing, she takes shots to land shots. Don't do that, right? Like, move your head a little bit.
Right.
And she's obviously tough. None of the shots seem to phase her. But don't take shots to land shots, right? Like, that's not, don't do that. That's Brendan Allen, right? And Brendan Allen's going to get knocked the fuck out by somebody for doing that, and has been previously, right? So for Jasmine, though, when she gets into her wrestling cycles, she's good. She's solid. She knows, she sets dilemmas. And that's how you know that she knows exactly what's happening. She drives that knee through the middle and disrupts the center of gravity for Fernandez. She drags her one way. Fernandez rides the hip. So she just takes her the other way. And it's like, whichever way you go, I don't mind, because you're going to be off balance and I'm going to be able to hit some form of mat return here. And then when it got to the mat, she passed well. She did things. And I was impressed with her perseverance to look for the crucifix. You might have wondered, but Spencer has just run away. I suspect it's for the dog. But I was happy with the perseverance of her getting to the crucifix. The crucifix, for people that have watched any Valentina Shevchenko fight, is when somebody passes the hip line into sort of side control and they collect the far arm or the near arm, depending on what sort of side control you're in. They collect the arm with the legs, and they sort of trap the arm between the thighs. And then they create an underhook and they consolidate the second arm with like a head and an arm pinch. And that gives them a really, really solid base to just start landing shots. Valentina Shevchenko has stopped multiple people with the crucifix, or at least busted people up. Jessica Andrade, Kenny Chukagian, these sorts of people. And the crucifix is something, interestingly, that we don't see enough in men's MMA, I think, because it's a position that is really has really dire consequences if you're able to control a crucifix and to use a crucifix to your advantage. However, from there, Jasudavicius was able to land some good elbows, was able to land some damage, and that was by far the clearest round for me. I think one of the things I would need to see from Jasudavicius in the future is either hunt that crucifix harder, or when she's in her more dominant grappling positions and she's in those offensive cycles, is to land more damage. Now, we're going to talk about Aliyev in a second as somebody who didn't land enough damage from the positional sort of dominant positions that he has. But if I'm Jasudavicius, I am looking to put stamps on those positions. And there's a larger conversation about the relationship between damage and positional control and how that's going to further MMA grappling in the future. But yeah,
we'll save that for a speaker's corner.
Almost certainly. Yeah.
Thank you for carrying that. Sorry for ducking off camera. We have had issues with my dog over the last 24 hours, and I needed to just kind of double check that the noises that were being made weren't anything serious. He is fine. Thank you for the well wishes to Christopher Wallace Kite, aka Biggie. We move to the catchweight bout between O'Day Osborne and Charles Johnson. I had high hopes for this fight. I was really looking forward to this fight. And I don't know why, but it felt flat to me. O'Day Osborne wins a split decision. They came out working at a good pace, but it just felt like where I expected it to elevate a little bit and get a little closer and tighter, or even more exciting. It just kind of ran level, which is fine. Not every fight has to be, all rise, but for me, it didn't land as well as I thought it would. What were your thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I was impressed by Osborne's pacing. And we've seen too many times that he runs out, throws everything he has in round one, and is then like, I'm tired now. Yeah, I'm tired, I guess. And he didn't. He took his shots well. He paced himself. He played long. I think for me, we talked about this with Johnson potentially coming out and making a statement of, oh, by the way, I'm really good and you should take notice, is that he didn't really take advantage of that. Like it's almost like he was a little timid, and maybe he was a little timid because he knows that Osborne carries big power, but it felt like in the moments where his momentum was ascending, he didn't continue to push on from there. And it felt to me like Johnson was going to be able to ride a way higher pace than Osborne. And when he had good moments and he had chances to make that pace, push Osborne to make the decision as to whether he wanted to be in that pace or not, he didn't. And then,
I do wonder how much of that is taking it on short notice and it being his second fight in 2 months and third fight since the middle of November. Like we've seen this with athletes, right? It's reminiscent to me of Andre Fialho last year, where it's like you're just fighting too often to be able to constantly go back to that well.
Maybe. And like it was a bit worrying to see him get taken down by Osborne a couple times. Now he got back up and did things just fine. It was never really a huge problem, but it was that's not the Charles Johnson that I think we were used to seeing. And there were elements of the Charles Johnson we were used to seeing, some nice grappling, some nice reversals, but again, not a ton of positional control like we would used to see. It felt to me more like a flat Charles Johnson performance, or a flatter Charles Johnson performance, than it was a flatter Osborne performance.
Yeah. We move to the lightweight division. Joe Solecki just runs through Carl Deaton. It's one-way traffic from Jump Street. He has a backpack for the first round. He has a backpack for most of the second round before choking him all the way unconscious. It doesn't answer any of the questions that I still have about Joe Solecki and whether he's got a greater upside than this. It keeps him moving forward. He's 5-1 in the UFC now. I hope he gets a matchup against someone. And this was, to be fair, he was supposed to fight a couple weeks ago, lost his opponent, short notice. This is what happens. You have a finger up, which means you have a name. I always like when you have names. So hit me with your name.
Terrence McKinney.
I mean, I would watch it. Absolutely. Would absolutely watch it.
That's the fight. And the reason why I think that's the fight is I don't think so. Solecki didn't show me things that, like, okay, let me start this whole thing again. Deaton on the feet was not a technical striker, but he was finding Solecki's chin. And sometimes when you're fighting somebody and you're expecting a technical sort of back and forth, and they aren't doing technical back and forth things, sometimes that's really frustrating and quite annoying and hard to deal with. I would have expected, though, if Solecki is somebody that we should be keeping an eye on, that he doesn't need to be a backpack for the 8 minutes that he was.
Right.
And I think I like the McKinney fight because McKinney can do the technical striking things better than somebody like Deaton. And if Joe Solecki is and can be a technical striker, we'll see a bit of it. But McKinney can also wrestle. And so that forces Solecki to be very selective as to where he takes the fight. McKinney is in need of a win, and Solecki is in need of a statement at the moment. And that's why I like those two names.
Yeah, I like that fight. I'm just sort of combing through here to see general idea of where Joe Solecki's at in terms of some of these other athletes, just in terms of appearances and number of fights. I wouldn't mind Jamie Malarkey as well. Just as a gritty, can do all of the things, but isn't maybe as far along and as explosively dangerous as Terrence McKinney.
Paddy Pimblett?
I mean, 100%. 100% would watch. I mean, most guys I want to see fight Paddy because I'm super curious to see when we get that level that we expect Paddy to run into. Brings us to our opener, still in the lightweight division. Nurulo Aliev gets a majority decision win over Rafael Alves. There's a point deduction in the first round for apparently biting. As I tweeted out on Saturday, we're doing biting shit now. Shouts to Shouts to Nick Diaz. This is one of those fights to me where, and I'm not trying to walk back what I said going in, because I said going in, if you beat Rafael Alves, it's a good win. It tells me a certain level of where you are. And I still hold to that, but I also came away from this going, we're not stepping on any gas pedals. We're not, because Nurullo Aliyev is green. And there's a good foundation, but he's a 22, 23-year-old that's green as can be. And we need to go not real slow, but also there's no need to step on the gas. We can just go the speed limit here for the next couple years and see what we have.
Yeah, his middle name might be Gabe. He's that green.
Hey,
we did it. Yeah, look,
for the like 6 people that know that Gabe Green is a UFC welterweight.
Yeah, thanks. It's obvious he can wrestle really, really well, right? His control positions are great. His ability to draw the hips away from the cage are great. His ability to chain his passes together, great. His submission defense, great. I would like to see him not have to use his submission defense so much. He's going to need to change the way he shoots takedowns so that people like Alves aren't just jumping on his neck all the time. Now, look, if they can't finish you, fine. But to me, it's more
better to not always be stuck there proving that they can't finish you.
Right. Like even more than that, it's like you're wasting time that you could be landing damage, right? There will come a point when, you know, there's been 6 lads you fought in the UFC and they've all jumped on your neck and they've all failed, where people will be like, fuck, I'm just not going to bother because it's a waste of my time. But let's not do the proving by attrition, and let's just put your head on the inside and, you know, keep it in his fucking chest and just not have to bother with this bollocks. But when it hit the ground, his control positions, and again, this is the speaker's corner, right? His control positions were brilliant. Alves wasn't able to get back up for long periods of time. He was ragdolled a lot. He was opted at the very end to look for closed guard triangles. Like, I'm sorry, if there's a bigger insult to your get-up game than saying, fuck, I guess we've got to triangle this fella, well, it's that, right? But they were close rounds. And they were close rounds because when on the feet, Alves was landing, and then Aliyev was taking him down and absolutely controlling him, but not landing a ton of damage. And I came away from that fight having known that positional changes and control score, well, positional changes obviously score nothing, but control scores little against impactful striking. I'm like, did he even win that fight? Like, did he? Because it was, I don't know. Alves did things on the feet, right? Alves did things on the feet. Not a ton of things.
No, but when if anybody did anything on the feet, it was Alves.
Right. And then we get to the ground, and I think there was a moment in the third, and it was 30 seconds left. And I was like, I have this as an Alves round, and he's going to lose this fight, even though he's absolutely wrestle-fucked him. And then he postures up and lands like 7 or 8 really good ground and pound shots. And I was like, you have absolutely pulled it out the bag here, lad.
And that's what he did on Contender Series as well. So he got a takedown fairly early in his fight with Josh Wick, and then kind of stayed in control positions, doing the top game thing. And then with a minute left in the round was like, okay, well, I've salted away all of this stretch. Let me just posture up and do these things. So if he postures up and does things more, going to be beneficial.
He needs so much work on the feet, though.
Yes.
Because what it seems like is that thus far in his career, he has been able to, and there was a fella on the amateur scene, and he's trained at the gym that I train at, and like he fought at welterweight. He is not a welterweight. He is way smaller than welterweight. And this fella didn't throw a punch. Not one. Not one on the feet.
Right.
Just ducked his head. Naruto ran into this fella's hips, took him down, and fucking mauled him. Like, absolutely mauled him. Now, Aliev looks like he has been getting away with feinting really aggressively and then ducking under shots, taking people down,
Right.
and mauling them, right?
Right.
It's not going to cut it in the
Not
UFC.
going to cut it at this level. Let's talk about the fight very briefly. So, the way it played out live as we're watching it is Rafael Alves shouts to the referee and sort of holds his hand out. And Mark Smith calls time. Referee Mark Smith calls time, signals for the replay. Aliev gets up and is like, I don't know what's going on. Gets sent to his corner. Mark Smith recognizes that there's a mark, an indentation of some kind on Rafael Alves's finger. The replay official, Chris Tione, for this fight says we can't see anything. And Mark Smith's like, great, I see a mark, and he takes the point. As they show the replay, and this is what you said to me yesterday as we were kind of discussing and you were going through the fight, the only way you get bit is if your hand is in that man's mouth, if your fingers are in that man's mouth. And so, are you fish hooking him? Are you grabbing on his teeth to lift his head up? What, like, and then for Mark Smith to just decide I'm taking the point feels a little suspect.
It's difficult, right? Because Mark Smith has to make a decision in the heat of the moment. He's had a look at the replay. I mean, he hasn't had a look at the replay. Your man outside the cage looked at the replay, and Mark's gone over to him. I don't know what the guy said, but I turned it on because I'm like, what the fuck's happening? And then Mark says, I can see a mark. Like, I can see a dent in his finger. Now, when you look at the replay, because you could argue, right? How's his fingers got into his mouth? Has Alves put it there, or has Aliev moved his head in such a way that
he's trying to bite his fingers?
Right. And from the position, Aliev has got his head buried in the sort of lower midriff of Alves, and his hands are locked in a body lock. So there's no way that Aliev is physically passing the hand to his mouth to bite it. And equally, given the angle of his head, I'm not sure he's doing much moving with his head to force the fingers into the mouth.
This isn't an active I'm trying to chomp situation.
And then again, you look at the replay and Alves is actually trying to pull the head up. Now, we can play devil's advocate down to the absolute nuance here of Alves in the heat of the moment chucks his hand wherever is closest to that chin. And if Aliev's mouth's open and he reaches mouth guard and it's sweaty and warm, in the heat of the moment, does Alves know it's a mouth guard, or does he just think it's a sweaty chin? Look, who knows, right? But does that mean Aliev should close his mouth? No, is the answer.
Right. But does it also mean he should lose a point?
Right. And equally, if we're talking about potential accidental biting and potential accidental fish hooking, it feels to me in the moment like it was a little bit of, we maybe want to give the fighters the benefit of the doubt here.
They feel to me like accidental eye poke, accidental nut shot. You're not trying to do it, but this happened. And so let's be a little more careful. Let's not do grabbing in his mouth things, and let's not do closing your mouth on his hand things. But ultimately, and this is a poor pun, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, and like I also see, and I'll give the other side, is like if you're Mark Smith, you also have to make a judgment based on the evidence that you can see.
For sure.
And if your man outside the cage hasn't said, looks like he's fish hooking him, Mark.
Right. And
then you then turn and Alves is protesting aggressively and saying he's biting me and fucking shoves his finger in his face. And you look at Aliev, who, by the way, obviously can't speak a fucking smack of English, and he doesn't really know what's going on
Right.
and isn't protesting in English. He's got looking at his corner like, what do I do? Mark's going to look around, read the room, and be like, well, your man's not protesting his innocence. I can see a mark on the hand, smells and looks like biting to me, so I'm going to take the point. And for that, I can't really knock him.
No, same. And as you said, it is heat of the moment. It is, he went through the steps that he can go through and made his call. And I think, as we say regularly, I just applaud them making these calls, whether I agree with them or not. Being ready and willing and able to do it is better to me than the constant, hey, don't do that we get most of the time. I'm glad that it ultimately didn't impact the outcome of the fight, although I do think it was a close fight. And as you said, can go back and scrutinize it, and maybe Alves does enough to win. But I think the larger takeaway, as we said, is that Aliev has some upside, but he's raw. And there's a lot of work to do, and we should give him all the time in the world to get there. Which brings us to the close of this event and means it's UFC 285 time. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you?
11.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm about a 14. I am.
And I'll say this now. I think I'm more excited. Okay, so the reason why I'm excited for this is not necessarily because JBJ is fighting after so many years. To me, this is both are Johnny Bones Jones and Valentina the people that we really think they are. That's what Valentina comes off the Tyler Santos fight and has maybe just dropped a duck. Maybe. Everyone has the chance. Everyone. GSP has had off nights. Anderson Silva's had off nights. Israel Adesonya's had off nights. Mighty Mouse had off nights. Everyone has had off nights. Fine. If Valentina comes out and absolutely fucking murders Alexa Grasso, I'm here for it. I'm excited. If Alexa Grasso goes out and beats Valentina Shevchenko, boy, oh boy, we've shocked the world. If Johnny Bones Jones comes back at heavyweight and is motivated like he was in the more recent light heavyweight defenses, the Daniel Cormiers and the Gustafsson 2s and whatever, and he can carry the weight at heavyweight, he's going to fucking rule that division for a long old time, boys. A long old time. And if Cyril Gagné comes out here after training / not training forever and beats Johnny Bones Jones.
Beats the GOAT.
He's not the GOAT. That's bullshit. But he is, well, what we've got on our hands, boys, is an absolute fucking superstar.
Sorry to have derailed you with the GOAT throw. That is a quote from Cyril Gane of John Jones is the GOAT, and if you beat the GOAT, that counts for something whether you have a belt or not. Which
so
is very true.
John Jones probably isn't the GOAT because the GOAT debate is ludicrous.
Yes, agreed.
But if Cyril Gane goes out and Johnny Bones Jones looks anything like motivated Johnny Bones Jones, boy, oh boy, have we got a fucking superstar on our hands. And we'll talk about this obviously on the preview show, but that's my biggest question. My biggest question is, what does John look like? Because if he comes out and looks amazing and Cyril beats him, fuck me.
I have an entire article coming out later this week on OSDB Sports that is solely the questions that I have about John Jones going into this, because this is honestly, to me, in 13, 14 years of covering this sport, the most fascinating fight that I've ever sat here to get prepared for, because there's so many elements of this that just can't be answered until Saturday night. We can speculate, we can straw man and steel man, and we will. None of those answers come officially for real until Cyril Gane is standing across the cage from John Jones and whoever is officiating that fight, my guess is probably Herb Dean, because it's always Herb Dean, says, okay, fight. And we see it. And I cannot wait. Cannot wait. This card is outstanding to me. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and I can skip Julian Marquez and Marc-Andre Barrio as a like, ooh, super excited, but like Ian Gary's back, Cameron Simon, who I'm interested in and have a interview coming out with on Wednesday. I mean, Tabitha Ricci, the debut of Farid Basharat, like this is top to bottom. I'm in. Good Lord, it's UFC 285 fight week. And ladies and gentlemen, that will bring us to a close for today. As Harry mentioned, we will be covering all of UFC 285 on this platform throughout the week. I will be here tomorrow with one question for every fight, and I have many questions for some of these fights. 10 things on Thursday, the preview show on Thursday, Ian and I on the picks and plays on Friday, and then it's go time. Then it's UFC 285, John Jones, Cyril Gane, Valentina Shevchenko, Alexa Grasso, the return of Shavkat Rakhmonov against Jeff Neal, Matoish Gamrot and Jalen Turner, the debut of Bo Nickel. Good Lord, baby Jesus. This is a wonderful card. We cannot wait to get there to talk to you about it. We thank you for listening. Follow him at BJJ_Harry Powell. Follow me at Spencer Kite. Sign up for the Patreon. It is just about the start of the month. SevereMMA.com/pints, the best URL in the business. Follow all the lads. Check out all the stuff that they dropped after a wonderful, amazing week of content from UFC Dublin. Shouts to all of the fellas for doing a great job with that. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week.